What just happened? Are the Devils good again? Are they giving me hope? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Upset victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah, this is March, baby. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play-by-play announcer, Devils are for Bucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. What a night in hockey, because not only did the New Jersey Devils upset the heavily favored Toronto Maple Leafs, but Zach Hyman and the narrative surrounding his 50-goal season at the age of 31 has caught headlines on social media for all the wrong reasons, because there was this clown up in Montreal saying that Hyman's goals are not really a true representation of hard work because he came from a wealthy family, and basically people were clowning on that guy, no pun intended. But how can you not be romantic about sports? Because what did Zach Hyman do in response? He got the game-winning goal in overtime to solidify the victory for the Edmonton Oilers. And I couldn't help but smile ear to ear. And I think a lot of people in the NHL discourse can back me up on that. And out in Arizona, Josh Doan, the son of legendary Coyotes player Shane Doan, made his NHL debut, and he scored not only his first career NHL goal, but his second career NHL goal with his father in attendance in front of the Arizona fan base. Once again, how can you not be romantic about sports? But obviously, the main talking point of this series is the New Jersey Devils. Let's get right into it, because I had a lot of doubts. I had a lot of fear going into this matchup, because the Maple Leafs did everything that I thought that they were going to do. Because Austin Matthews, he netted his 59th goal of the season in the second period. The Leafs took the momentum out of the Devils' sails not once, but twice. They scored the opening goal thanks to Tyler Bertuzzi. And in the second period, the Maple Leafs got off to a much better start, which resulted in them having the lead. And I was really worried for the Devils at that very moment. And they shot the puck a whole lot. This really should have been a blowout in favor of the Leafs. But what was the main difference maker? It was Jake Allen in net. Jake the Snake coming up clutch for the Devils once again. We're going to talk a lot about him in the second segment, but basically my overall thoughts on the game is that this was an ugly victory for the Devils, but at this point, any victory is a good victory, because like I've said in a few prior episodes, the Devils can really only afford to lose 2 more games if they want any chance of making the playoffs, because their playoff chances actually increased after this game, because going into this matchup, I believe it was anywhere from 5 to a little less than 10%. And then at the conclusion of this game, it was now at 13%. Now, let me just be perfectly clear. I'm not saying that the Devils will make the playoffs, but it's not a 0% chance, but a lot needs to go well for them. And like I've also said, it's not enough for them to win, because let's look at the out-of-town scoreboard, because out in Washington, worst case scenario happened in that matchup between the Capitals and the Red Wings. That game went into overtime, and the Capitals ended up winning. We'll talk about that game momentarily, but the second game that needed to be highlighted was the Philadelphia Flyers and the New York Rangers. I'm going to catch so much heat from a few Rangers fans who watch my show, which, by the way, why are you watching a Devils-centric podcast when you are a Rangers fan? That doesn't make much sense, but to each their own. The Flyers lost in OT to the Rangers, so the Flyers still got a point, but at least the Flyers did not win. And it pains me to say this, but the Devils needed the Rangers' help in this sort of aspect. But going back to the Capitals and Wings, because that is crucial in the wild card standings. When looking at how the wild East is shaping up, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they have 85 points in the first slot in the wild card. I think they're going to coast their way to a playoff position. The Washington Capitals, they have turned a lot of heads. They're currently on a 3-game winning streak. They have 81 points. The Red Wings now have 79, and the Devils have 76, meaning they are 5 points out of a playoff position. And when looking at the Metropolitan Division, just for funsies, the Devils still have some work to do because the Flyers now have 82 and the Devils have 76 once again, meaning they gained some traction, but ahead of them obviously are the Capitals. Now, going back to what I said, the Devils have a 13% chance of getting to the playoffs. And a lot needs to go well for them because it's not enough for them to just win out. They're going to need some help. But let's focus on what the Devils can control, because when looking ahead of the schedule, this win for the Devils against the Maple Leafs was vital. Their next game will be Friday against the Buffalo Sabres, then the Pittsburgh Penguins, New York Rangers, Ottawa Senators, Nashville Predators, Toronto Maple Leafs back-to-back, Flyers, and Islanders to close out the season. Let's look at the schedule conservatively and let's pick and choose when the Devils can lose. All right, so they already picked up the big win against the Maple Leafs. Let's just say the 2 times that the Devils have to face the Maple Leafs, they're going to lose one of those games. Okay, that's 1 win off the table. But now you got to play the Predators at some point and also the Rangers. I know the Devils have beaten the Predators this season, but the past 20 or so games, Andrew Brunette, he's got something clicking out in Smashville because I believe it's been over 20 games since the Predators lost in regulation. That's not going to be an easy matchup. But the good news is the game will be played at the Prudential Center because the Devils have a history of not performing well in Nashville. But that is definitely something to circle. The Devils have not beaten the Rangers this year, and this is a game where they're going to have to dig real deep because they're going to have to play their cards correctly. And like I said, in the 2 matchups against the Maple Leafs, you got to win one of them. One of those games is a must win. I highly suggest trying to beat the Maple Leafs on the 9th, so that way that weight is kind of taken off your back. But when looking at the rest of the schedule, I think the Devils can beat the Sabres, but the only consistent thing about this Devils team is their inconsistency. The Devils have won 7 straight games against the Penguins. I'm feeling rather confident. The Devils have handled the Senators before, but I did not forget that game from last week. Hopefully the Devils have learned their lesson. When looking at the 2 final regular season games on the docket, I think the Devils can beat the Flyers. I've seen them beat the Flyers before. However, I've seen them lose to the Flyers as well. I was actually present for one of those games. And then to close off the regular season against the Islanders, the Devils have pretty much handled the Islanders, but nothing is guaranteed in this league. Once again, we're just focusing on what the Devils can control because, like I said, getting that win against the Maple Leafs was crucial, and now that sort of takes a weight off their shoulder. Now it's pick and choose. Which 2 games can you afford to drop? Because you're going to have to win against the Sabres, Penguins, Senators, Islanders, and Flyers. I think the Devils are capable of doing it. Might be wishful thinking on my end, but just wanted to give you guys that sort of perspective as to how the season could shape up for the Devils because not many games are remaining and they're still trying to make that playoff push. It doesn't seem they've lost hope. Okay, we're going to talk about the big performances in this game against the Maple Leafs momentarily. But before we continue, I want to tell you guys about Sleeper because regardless of where the Devils finish in the standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey all on the Sleeper app. I have actually used the Sleeper app to participate in fantasy football. And speaking of which, you don't just have to participate in fantasy hockey. Like I said, you can participate in fantasy football, basketball, baseball, college football, all on Sleeper. And Sleeper is the official daily fantasy app of Locked On NHL. Sleeper is our number 1 choice for our daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy contests. All you have to do is pick weather studs like Jack Hughes, Nico, Hischier, Jake Allen will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Devils fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. All right. Let's name some honorable mentions and also my personal 3 stars of the game against the Maple Leafs. Now, before I talk about some of these players individually, I just want to give a big honorable mention to the big 4 for the Devils, courtesy of Justin Bailey. He's a writer over at Jersey Sporting News. He put out the stats the last 15 games for Timo Meier, Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, and Jesper Bratt. Let's start off with Timo Meier, who has arguably been the Devils' best player the last few weeks. 13 goals, 8 assists, 21 points. Nico Hischier, 5 goals, 14 assists, 19 points. Jack Hughes, 8 goals, 11 assists, 19 points. Jesper Bratt, 2 goals, 11 assists, 13 points. That is 72 points combined the last 15 outings for the big 4 for the Devils. Now, I know I always talk about the big 3 in Hughes, Hischier, and Bratt, but I definitely got to include Meier in this case because, like I said, he has been one of the Devils' best players. Worth mentioning that Timo Meier did score in this game, and he's continuing his great point production. All right, another honorable mention is Curtis Lazar. He is the unsung hero in this matchup. Did you know the final 3 goals for the Devils, who had the primary assist? It was Curtis Lazar. We always talk about how good of a defensive impact Curtis Lazar has. We talk about his energy. We talk about how hard he plays the game. And no, it's not because he comes from a wealthy family. And that's just a little joke to that quote unquote reporter up in Montreal who was dunking on Zach Hyman. But anyway, digressing a little bit, I don't know Curtis Lazar's family financial background, but Curtis Lazar came to the Devils just to be a grit type of player because that's exactly what Tom Fitzgerald was looking for. But he has taken strides in his offensive development. And that's something that needs to be talked about just a little bit more, if you ask me, because Curtis Lazar, just a week or 2 ago, he surpassed his career high in points. Why is that not being talked about a little bit more? I think Curtis Lazar has gone from a gritty type of player to a solid point productive player. He's not a threat to get a goal or an assist every given game, but he seems to get it when it matters most because, like I said, he got these points, the last 3 goals for the Devils, as in he got the primary assist on Jack Hughes' 2 goals in the 3rd period. And my other honorable mention is Max Willman coming up, CLUTCH, for the Devils because he got the game-winning goal in the 2nd period, right place, right time, and he found a wide open opportunity thanks to Curtis Lazar and Chris Tierney, the Copra, once again. And Jesper Bratt, similar to Curtis Lazar, finished off with 3 assists. The scoring hasn't been as prolific for Jesper Bratt, and I've hammered that home the last few weeks, but he still finds a way to be very productive for this Devils team. And I am so glad that Jesper Bratt is still finding ways to put points on the boards. And once again, these are not my 3 stars. These are honorable mentions, which goes to show you how big of an impact these players had on the game. And now I got to narrow it down to 3 star players. My 3rd star, Nico Hischier, finishing off with 3 points, 1 goal, 2 assists. We always look to the captain to set the tone. Did Nico Hischier score the opening goal for the Devils? No, but he put them out to a 2-1 lead in the 1st period. Like I said, I was fearful that the momentum was going to be taken out of the Devils' sails early because once Tyler Bertuzzi scored within the opening minute or so, I thought this was going to be a long night for the Devils. But Luke Hughes, who has looked better as of late, he got the opening goal for the Devils to tie it 1-1 just 3 minutes later. Jesper Bratt got the primary assist, secondary assist, Nico Hischier. Then Nico Hischier scored a goal himself. I know we always talk about Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes sort of being like peanut butter and jelly, but don't underestimate the dynamic duo and the partnership between Nico Hischier and Jesper Bratt. 2-on-1 in their favor. I remember saying back in January when they were playing against the Seattle Kraken, I believe, that Bratt and Hischier on the 2-on-1 odd man rush, that is trouble. You are asking for a problem. And this time it was Jesper Bratt setting up Nico Hischier, and Hischier buried it. And that gave the Devils lead once again. And that sort of gave them some hope, saying maybe they can beat the Maple Leafs. And then my second star, we talk about a captain setting the tone and trying to get his team back into the game. Well, Jack Hughes, he ended the game for the Devils, because in the third period, Jack Hughes scored not once, but twice. His first goal of the game came at the hands of a breakaway opportunity. And we all know that is also dangerous. Talked about Jesper Bratt and Nico Hischier 2-on-1 in their favor. Well, Jack Hughes off and running, that is also dangerous, as Hughes netted his 25th goal of the season. That put the Devils up to a 5-3 lead. And that was, in my opinion, the final nail in the coffin. But Hughes made sure to solidify it even more, because just a couple minutes later, Maple Leafs get the extra attacker, net is empty, and who gets the empty netter goal? Jack Hughes, point blank attempt. And it is 6-3 in favor of the Devils. Jack Hughes now leads the team in goals with 26, and before he was dealt away to the city with one airport, Tyler Toffoli in his Devils tenure had 26 goals, and I still counted that as the leading goal scorer for the Devils. I take it how you want to take it, but Jack Hughes now has 26 himself, and I can sleep well at night. Just incredible that Jack Hughes is able to do that despite missing significant time. And now let's talk about the hero of this game, Jake Allen, who made a lot of great saves for the Devils, and that is an understatement. He is my first star of the game. At the conclusion of the game, the expected goals against was around 4.7. Goals save above expected, 1.7. He was incredible from start to finish. He saw so many shots from the Maple Leafs just in the opening period alone. In the first period, he saw 25 shots, made 24 saves. I know I talk about how the defense needs to improve for the Devils, but goaltending has also been a big issue. But Jake Allen, he has filled the shoes quite nicely. And that continued the rest of the game. And we saw that in the third period, because I was having heart attack after heart attack after heart attack watching Jake Allen make some of those saves, because I'm just like, no, cover it up in this case. No, what are you doing? You're out of position. Don't do this. But he stood strong. And I think the Devils should be counting their lucky stars that he was there to save the day once again, because like I said in segment one, the Toronto Maple Leafs did everything correct except win. This was their game. They were the more dominant team, but Jake Allen coming to the rescue. And I was there for one of Jake Allen's big performances as a member of the Devils, because I traveled with the team to Vegas, and despite coming on the losing end, I talked about it in that post-game recap episode that Jake Allen was the epitome as to what's been missing for the Devils. And you could just see his overall approach. It changes big time. Let's talk about Jake Allen just a little bit more. If the Devils do make the playoffs, and that is a big if, because the odds are still not in their favor and they still have a lot of work to do, only a 13% chance of making the playoffs. If the Devils do make the playoffs, Jake Allen, this might be a hot take, is my MVP. Because let's think of the circumstances. And I didn't really get the chance to do a full-fledged episode on this, and I apologize, but I was on vacation. When the Devils traded for Jake Allen, people just thought of it as, including myself, as just a way to get some extra bodies to help out Nico Dawes and Akira Schmid, so that way the pressure is not always on their shoulders, because the big concern that was surrounding the Devils discourse was that Nico Dawes was taking on too much responsibility and playing in too many games, and the Devils have a history of overworking their goalies. Look at Corey Schneider, look at Mackenzie Blackwood. That was a big concern, and the question was, would Tom Fitzgerald get a goalie at the deadline? Obviously, people had their eyes set on Jacob Markstrom, but here comes Jake Allen and Kaapo Kähkönen. Vitek Vanecek was signed for this year and also next year, but Kaapo Kähkönen, the goalie that the Devils got in that deal, only has 1 year remaining, and that's this year. So he'll become an unrestricted free agent at the conclusion of this season. And Jake Allen, Tom Fitzgerald traded away a third conditional pick for Jake Allen's services. He signed for this year, next year, at a $7.7 million clip. And the Montreal Canadiens are retaining 50% of that. I am head over heels on Jake Allen right now. And thank you to the Habs organization for giving the Devils this gift and giving them a fighting chance. I don't think that was intentional at all, because I think the Canadiens were doing everything they could to get rid of Jake Allen. But I just want to make something perfectly clear. I don't think Jake Allen should be the starter come next year. I think Tom Fitzgerald should continue to hit up the phone lines to look for a top-notch goalie, because my question is, how much further can you push Jake Allen? I think he is a suitable backup. I think he is a very good backup option for the Devils come next season. And if the Devils get a top-notch goalie and clean up their defense a little bit more, then I think this team can definitely make a deep playoff push come next year. And I'll probably do a full-fledged episode, but focusing on this game, Jake Allen, just big in between the pipes once again. And I think that's been the big difference maker ever since Lindy Ruff was given the can, which is you look at the save percentages for goalies, and it's a lot better for the Devils. All right, let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. Shots on goal differential, 45-25 in favor of the Maple Leafs. Whoo, boy. Like I said, Jake Allen, thank you. Face-off percentage, 51.1% to the Maple Leafs, 48.9% to the Devils. Power play percentage, Devils were 0 for 2. Maple Leafs were 0 for 2 as well. Hits, 47-29 in favor of the Maple Leafs. Block shots, 15-7 in favor of the Devils. Giveaways, 19-16 in favor of the Maple Leafs. Takeaways, 5-2 in favor of the Maple Leafs. This was an ugly victory for the Devils. No way around it. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. But they got the win, and any win is a good win in my eyes at this point, because beggars cannot be choosers. But if I had to be 100% honest, if I had to give the Devils a letter grade, I want to give them a C, but I'll give them a few extra points for the strong performance from Jake Allen. I'll give them a B- because this was not a pretty game. Devils did have to score a lot, and that is not a recipe if you want to win consistently. But going up against the Toronto Maple Leafs, the heavily favored unit and one of the best teams in the NHL with one of the best players currently in the league, you'll take any win you can get. But I want to make something perfectly clear. The job is not finished. You still got to face this team 2 more times. You got to tighten up a little bit more, and you got to try to get at least 1 win in those 2 matchups, looking the rest of the way. But that's where I'm going to settle with. Let me know what you guys think. This definitely could be in contention for Game of the Year, despite the circumstances, but it was exciting to watch. Unfortunately, Bill Spalding and Ken Danico weren't on the call. It was on ESPN Plus. And is it me, or did it seem like that ESPN Plus was kind of condescending the Devils just a little bit? But that's just my 2-cent opinion. Let me know what you guys think. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X page app at TreyMatt4 and the show's X page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day in New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.